But anyway, let me tell you about my Safari stock and why Anduril is a company that I'm trying to buy, and they are a defense tech startup. And this is particularly difficult because it's a private company. You can't just go out and buy the shares. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to, if I'm honest. I'm all over a whole bunch of like private listing platforms. They're all US companies. I got a couple of private investments in the UK.
Can you tell our listeners how one goes about gaining entry
Hmm.
to a to a platform like that?
Yeah. So, like, okay. So let me tell you about Anduril and like its valuation, and then maybe we can come into that because the valuation actually tells us something about how you'd get access to the shares. They are a defense technology, military technology company. It's founded by a guy called Palmer Luckey. And if you're familiar with that name, it might be because he also invented the Oculus and then sold that to Facebook as it was before it became Meta. But he's now in military technology and he's a super smart guy. You think about the prime contractors. I own one of them in my portfolio, Lockheed Martin, but you've also got like Boeing and Raytheon and a bunch of others. Like, well, we talked at the top of the episode about America is broke. It's because like a ton of America's money is spent on military technology, and it's a bit of a legacy procurement process today where these prime contractors essentially they're selling stuff on cost plus, which means if it's going to cost Lockheed like $10 billion to develop like the next fighter aircraft, then they'll sell that to the US government for $10 billion plus whatever the agreed profit margin is. Like that doesn't motivate companies like those guys to be efficient and optimize and cut costs where you've got like a really properly competitive market. So Palmer Luckey's company, Anduril, are trying to bring that startup competitive thinking, reusable components to the military space. And you might have seen some YouTubes of their technology. They've got a whole range of drones and UAVs and other cool bits of technology. But actually, they're primarily a software company. Their main product is something called Lattice, which is I couldn't tell you how it differs from Palantir, which is another company I own. But Lattice is like a software stack that integrates a whole bunch of different sensors and systems to give like the operators a comprehensive understanding of like a military, a battlefield situation. Now, I got called out actually. I do like my monthly tweet thread now where I post my whole portfolio on X and LinkedIn and some other places. And I break down like recent transactions I've done. And I do position, I think about my portfolio as being like, I'm invested in companies that are making the world a better place. And some dude called me out, like I saw it this morning when I woke up. He's like, "Oh, you're a clown. You say you're trying to make the world a better place, but you own Lockheed Martin." And like, I've got to own that, right? I in that same bucket is Palantir and is my hoped for acquisition of a tiny, tiny piece of Anduril, because if there ain't a world, right, there ain't a world to make a better place. And I've 180'd on this in the last 5 or 6 years, I think, where I've come to realize that, I don't know, because I'm like an older guy or something, I've just come to realize that it's not pragmatic to have your head up your ass a little bit, perhaps, and say, oh, military technology is bad. Like, you got to protect your way of life. And sometimes you got to, if you're a big behemoth like the US, you got to get out there and protect other like minded cultures and their ways of life, a bit like what's happening in Ukraine right now and in the Middle East. So, anyway, long story short, like military technology, I think is a essential. And if I just take all the emotions out of it and everything else, like this is a growth in industry, right? Hard to argue that like military tech companies are not going to be doing very well. So, underpinning all of this is also my thought that, hey, this is going to be like a growth sector. I want to be invested in it. So, getting invested in it. How do you buy shares of, let's say, Anduril specifically? So they're not public, which means you can't go and download like a quarterly or an annual report. You've got really no insight into the company at all, other than what you can glean from like catching interviews with members of the leadership team and maybe looking at press releases and other articles from that space. So it's actually quite hard to get a clear sense of really anything about the company. When you go public, suddenly you have all of these requirements to be super transparent and publish like all of your books and everything, at least on an annual basis and a quarterly basis. You give like updates. But right now, you've got none of that information if you want to invest in a company like Anduril or SpaceX or Stripe or any of the other big famous private companies and tiny little ones too. Anduril did their last round, they did a Series F. So I don't know if you know how this stuff works. Like when you start off, you're like maybe have like a friends and family round when you're like literally like a, $1 million company. And then you might do like a seed round where you raise like a bit more money, typically up to maybe $5 million, something like that, 10 million bucks. And then Series A, Series B, C, D, E, F. So Anduril are up to Series F. And in their Series F, which was quite recent, June 2024, they raised just over $1 billion at a post money valuation of $14 billion. So you can buy shares on the private market, the secondary market. And like if you're a massive venture capital firm, then you can buy directly in that round. Like there were funds like Founders Fund getting involved, and they took a piece of the Series F because they're negotiating directly with the company, and now they own like a chunk of that $1 billion of new stock that was issued. But if you're some tiny little dude like me who's got nothing like $1 billion to invest, they're not going to give you the time of day. They're not interested in talking to you. But there are shares available because you've got, say, employees who've vested their stock options and they want to sell them. And also, sometimes some of these funds maybe break it down and they'll sell their piece and they'll create what's called special purpose vehicles, SPVs. So it's almost like companies within companies within companies. And if some of these bigger shareholders want to sell pieces of their allocation, they can do that through an SPV. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get a piece of an SPV that's invested in Anduril. And there's no liquidity. Like I've put bids in on a couple of them. Like right now, you just got to pay through the nose. Those guys got in at a $14 billion valuation a couple of months ago. But if I just look at where it's trading right now, it's probably closer to $30 billion. And
Wait, how do you know where it's trading at if it's private?
because some of these secondary markets publish like the last transaction that was successful, where a buyer and a seller, like it's not like a stock market where you buy at the bid price and sell at the offer price and you don't know who your counterparty is. If you're buying in the secondary market, like there's a contract, you have to get lawyers involved potentially, depending on how mature the company you're buying from is. Essentially, you're buying like shares of a company, and that company exists to own shares of the target company, Anduril in this case. And so, when some of these secondary market sellers a buyer have well they've like there's been like a buyer and a seller have found each other. So most recently, most recent private market trade was at $35, which was a couple of days ago. So that puts the market cap at about $30 billion. So like you can't use any of your investing skill set really for this sort of stuff because who knows if $30 billion is a fair price to pay for Anduril. All I know with certainty is some very smart people thought that $14 billion was a fair price, like back in June.
That has a bunch of warning bells
Oh,
coming
awesome.
up for me, but there's guy I feel incredulous to think that if you're a serious investor with a lot of money, that there is no equivalent of something like annual report or latest earnings or anything like that. You're making it sound like it's just, yeah, like hearsay or trust based. That can't be right.
No, but it's not publicly available. So if you are an investor, right, you will get investor materials. But typically, like I'm like a bunch of the companies I have a small private stake in, I'll get an email every quarter with like a business update. It won't be formalized. It comes from the company itself. It's not like been through anything like the Securities and Exchange Commission. It could be arbitrary format. One of the companies literally just sends like an email with a couple of pretty pictures. Another one just
Right.
sends like a few bullet points. There is a lot of trust involved. You are taking the company at its word because that information isn't always audited. So yeah, so there is trust involved. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This so I would put this in the obviously beyond expert graduate level of investing. You don't want to come anywhere near this stuff unless you happen to have some inside information of the legal kind, or you're properly connected to someone, or like this. Yeah. But may I offer one comment about the sort of big holistic picture in this?
Hmm.
As you were describing, work investing into the military industrial complex, it is another one of those things where you said yourself, there's our idealism and then there's the reality on the ground, and then in the end everybody still has to make their own ethical choices.
Yeah,
uh, for me, I don't think I could ever invest in a company like this, even if I upgrade my software to we need companies like this. Yeah. So it's an open question everyone needs to wrestle with. Not every company is, no matter how promising, you could sleep at night owning. I don't think I could. Yeah. So,
yeah, no, I totally get that. It's not for everybody. Just like a bunch of people make good money investing in tobacco companies, like that's not for me.
but the world is getting, yeah. I mean, yeah. Let's not spend no use in me speculating and spinning off on moral theory right now. But as a potential investor, I would be damn sure that, or as sure as I could be, that this is not exacerbating the world into a much darker place faster than it would otherwise get to on its own.
Yeah, I think like bad things happen whether you want them to or not, and I'd rather be part of a coalition of countries that had the best technology. Like I'm just playing Age of Wonders 4 because I'm always playing some like game in the background on PC, like here and there. And I just started playing it a few days ago, so I spent like way too much time staring at the damn thing. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a bit like Civilization, Civ 6, kind of like that.
Yeah.
There's like lots of ways of being victorious, like a military victory where you just kind of like beat everyone into submission. There's like a culture victory where you win them over with your art, or a religious victory where you kind of convert everybody. I always find myself going for like the science victory, right? Because you can out science people, and in Civ 6, that's like you win by like
Oh,
launching like shit and like putting satellites up and doing stuff like that. And in
have I got a?
yeah,
Oh,
so I'm like even if you look like you're losing, if you're winning at the science and innovation, like you'll suddenly come out of nowhere, and your competitors will be like, "Holy f! Like, where did you pull that victory from, Luke?" So yeah, I feel like companies like Palantir and Anduril, they're arguably, they're chasing the military victory, um, but they're really like science companies, and I'm glad it's the West that has these companies in its portfolio.
I'd be remiss not to point out that as a professor of literature, there is a book called Frankenstein
Hmm.
by Mary Shelley, which the Romantics thought, they thought some deep thoughts about the dangers of thinking that man could control nature and via his highfalutin reason mess with the natural order. And if you've read that book, which you're a Brit, it's by your people.
I've read the book. I'm familiar with the story. Yeah.
Yeah, well, read the book. It's a tale as old as time, but that distinction between the military complex as one form of victory and science, there's science has its own troubles.
Well, as we will see, as soon as Elon's actually got his robo taxis on the streets, right, there will be deaths, but it's in the name of progress. Yeah.
Yeah.